Would you like to see how grandmasters win and lose their chess games in less than 25 moves? I'm Grandmaster Max Illingworth of Illingworth Chess, and in this video, we are going to see some miniatures, games that end in less than 25 moves, not because of some prearranged bomb cloud draw kind of thing, like, you may recall Carlsen and Hikaru having this game, King E2, King E7, and, they just repeat moves and agree a draw. None of this. All the games, blood is spilled on the board. Starting with our first game here, between Ivan Saric playing as white, Saric being past European chess champion, playing against one of the latest Indian grandmasters, Ritraba Gua, who had an incredible tournament in the World Rapid. He was performing at a 2,700 level, holding his own against top grandmasters. Let's see how he does as black in this game. So we have 94. So this is all mainline theory, I'm not going to waste your time explain all of the vagaries of things like Queen A5 or Knight D7, but, Bishop E6 black is trying to be creative, and with the move Bishop E7 white in turn shows that, he understands black's idea, that a move like D4, while very natural and very tempting, it runs into Bishop to D5, and then black would then play his move Bishop takes F3, and either you take back with the queen as you would like to, but then you lose the pawn, and your compensation is not, let's say, giving a real advantage, to say the least. Or you play Gf3 and then your pawn structure just sucks, So instead, with Bishop E2, we are preparing this D4 move, and the game went Knight D7. And I get at a certain point in this game, let's say, Queen D3, black goes Queen D5. I mean, white is definitely somewhat better. But still, at Grand's point, you might be wondering, well, why are we looking at this game where, black is just, playing just to not lose and, just trying to put up the wall and say, I have a fortress, Fort Knox, so you can't break me. Well, all will make sense very soon. Queen B3 is played, hitting this weakness, black castles, and white is basically just winning in this position according to computer, and, well, the game kind of bears out as well, Because after Bishop E3, I mean, look at this queen. You brought your queen out too early. I mean, this is something I learned in, first grade or second grade whenever I started, playing chess. It was so long ago I already forgot, but, we learned don't bring the queen out too early, or it might get trapped. And that's kind of what happens in the game. Knight G4, I think you see what a blow that is coming. White goes Bishop D3, and, who cares about this bishop when the black queen is about to die. The game ended Bishop C4, Bishop E4, and, I think most people would resign, but black decided to play one more move of A6. Pawn shot a little bit too far there. He played A6. Stopping rook A7, but allowing another blow. Bishop F5, and, black took the hint and resigned here. A very crushing game. Of course, keep in mind this was game 11 of 21 in the World Blitz. This was, the 11th game they played on the day. So, of course, these sort of mistakes are kind of a result of exhaustion. Keep in mind, they didn't even have a rest day after 3 days of the Rapid. They were just playing the Blitz right afterwards. So, you could say, they're a little bit tired, and, there are elements beyond, let's say, the pure calculation and raw chess skill, but just the physical stamina, right? By the way, if you are enjoying this video so far, make sure to smash that like button and definitely subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest way to improve your chess. Our next game is between Timur Gareev against Fabiano Caruana, and Caruana, believe it or not, was the one who was playing creatively, and Gareev was the one who was playing normal chess. Can you believe that? Was it opposites day? Well, after Knight F3, I mean, maybe Caruana's idea behind D6 was to play some, E5 move order and play old Indian style, maybe this kind of thing. I don't know. But anyway, he goes Knight F3 to stop E5, and white goes G6. And just when you think that it's about to transpose back, a King's Indian, and some, I hack on this side, you hack on this side, and we open our eyes on move 20 and look at the mess we created. But no, Bishop F5. Caruana decides to stop the move E4. A very optimistic move, to say the least. And, a move like Queen B3 is one idea, but Gareev goes H3, just wanting to kick that bishop out of the way. We have Bishop to G7. And so we get this basically poor man's King's Indian for black, where, H3, and this is the moves white would normally play, in the Makoganov H3, G4 lines anyhow, right? But black is saying, well, I don't have to play E5 and, let you, let's say, get that sort of D5 structure. Like, for those who don't play the Makogonov at all as white, I can just explain that, in such a position, if black does get an f5, white is going to say that the open g file actually gives white all the attacking chance on the king side. But in the Southern, if you're not playing the King's Indian, if you're playing the King's Indian and you're not playing with f5, it's almost like, I don't know, trying to go on a date with a girl and you didn't, like, put on any, put on any clothes, or, like, you didn't prepare at all for the occasion. So it's like you can't have one without the other. At least if you, want to have any hope of drawing or winning. So therefore, Caruana goes for the plan B. He goes for the move c5 in this position, realizing that if white goes dc5, that, well, then he's just down a pawn, but at least he managed to do some bluff here. But okay, more serious point is that if queen a5, which I think might have been Caruana's idea, some cd6, knight e4, these kind of tricks. But actually after knight d2, it turns out that Caruana would have just blundered more or less, that after dc5... I even wonder if you can just play knight b3 and win a pawn at this point, and frankly I don't really see anything terribly wrong with that. But in any case, white's got the center and better development, and just airing is better about white's position, yeah? So, white, instead of doing this and grabbing the pawn, he plays d5, which I don't think is as good a move as dc5, but it's not terrible either. White should still be better. And I guess Caruana realized if he plays some normal Benoni moves like e6, rook e8, that the position is just kind of bad, like just very passive. So he plays b5, trying to make it sort of Benko style. It's not a great Benko, but you got to take your chances where you can. And it kind of paid off in the game, because after a6, Gareev maybe got a little bit too creative and tried too hard to be resourceful, when maybe just a simple move was the way to go. I mean, I think if white just takes on a6, develops his bishop to the Shanklin square of c4. Only people who study his chess will get the reference. But anyway, the point is that you castle. One of these days you're probably going to go e5, like you'll back it up with some pieces, get some pressure on d6, and that's going to distract black from the usual, Benko-y kind of counterplay. But of course it's much easier to say with the engine turned on than with, the heated battle in a blitz game where you're just like bang, 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 try not to flag. Well, these guys, I think, did have like, what, a 3+... It was a 3+2 increment. I think that was the case. I had 2-second increment. So you're not going to flag in this unless your brain leaves like your head for a second or something, which in general doesn't happen to chess players. So after a4, rook a, queen a5, like it's kind of shocking to me honestly that Gareev didn't just play some move to deal with the pin. Danger levels like just bishop d2 and, well, if a takes b5, you go for, let's say, bishop takes b5 or knight b5, and I mean, it's a position, yeah? Maybe black gets the pawn back in some way, but, you can castle and you've still got a passed a pawn of your own. So, it's just a game, yeah? With queen b4, etc. But instead, Gareev just blundered outright with rook a3, and I think that it's only... Well, it scales throughout round 19 of 22 for the event, so I think that it really just comes down to sheer mental exhaustion, I would say, at this point. Because Gareev actually played Caruana with white also in the rapid and was actually winning against him, but then he kind of blundered the trick and it was only a draw. But yeah, I think you see it now, right? That you just grab a pawn with knight e4 and white is complete cactus. The game ended. Bishop d2, take, queen b4. And since there's not much white can really do, he went for ba6. I think you have to be a computer to play b6 in such a position and you'd still lose anyway. But yeah, after bishop to b5, it's kind of like you're adding insult to injury, yeah? Bishop takes b5, knight takes b5. And after bishop b2, I mean, black is up a pawn, but not only is he up a pawn, but you can kind of see the whole white pieces are falling apart, yeah? That, like, say, if I just make this a variation, if we play rook e3, just bishop f6 even, and, you're going to take this pawn. If they trade queens, then, I mean, you're attacking this guy, you're attacking this guy. You've got a knight c2 fork as well, and, it's really not too early for white to resign, and that is what Gareev did at this point. So this was a pretty crushing win, and kind of shows, I think, why I often have very good results with the Benko in Blitz, because, yeah, engine will say +1 or whatever, but it's not so easy for white to consolidate without time on the clock to think about how to defend, yeah? So let's see the next game. This one was actually a bit of a mismatch, quite frankly. It's Andres Heimann, the German Grandmaster 2581, playing against a local player from Poland, Mr. Masternak. But, okay, it was a winner. Like, I don't think I need to spend time going into all the vagaries of the winnower, but like, you know that that this is a main line where black, you know, is given up the dark squares to a certain extent, but white's got some doubled pawns and structure's a little bit less flexible. Though it is true, I do think white is a little bit better in these lines, and queen g4, as white played, is the main line. You know, it can have some very sharp poison pawn fury if black lets white take the pawn. The move king f8 is actually one that about, let's say, 3, maybe 4 years ago, I actually recommended in like a sort of private file I created for a student, because I sort of kind of like the simplicity of going for like queen c7, b6, bishop a6, and trying to trade the bishops. But in recent Grandmaster games, black is just getting belted nearly every time. And, well, a4 is just a very natural move, yeah, trying to go bishop a3 and just channel that pin and use the power of the unopposed bishop. Black tries to avoid that by playing queen a5 so that the bishop comes to d2. But a big difference with this position compared to, let's say, a line like the black queen blues with c5 and queen a5, like a big difference here, as you'll observe, is that, you know, if bishop d2, that black now has queen a4, and I'm not saying that this line is necessarily playable for black, but at least he's managing to, you know, blockade and, you know, put some pressure on the queen side, so it's not so easy for white to activate that bishop in the long term. Whereas here it's quite a different story, yeah, when black is not able to blockade the queen side effectively. After knight bc6, Hyman goes for a quite nice move of h4. Kind of weird, when I say Hyman, I think of like Hyman Roth, but, you know, this is just because I watched The Godfather way too many times in my life. But okay, I guess these sort of jokes aside, well, black plays the move knight to f5. Trying to activate the knight. Honestly, I don't think it's a very good move, like you're just asking for a, you know, a g4 move at some moment. Probably instead you should play... Honestly, it's hard to say. Like, I think it's just a bad position for black. Maybe h6 or h5, but I'm not really convinced, quite frankly. Like, this is also creating a target for the pieces, so I think white is just much better whatever black does, because black just screwed up the opening, yeah? But after knight f5, we had knight f3, and indeed white did play the move queen f4, a very nice move to prepare g4. If you want to stop black playing h5, you could have played h5 first and then gone for it this way, and, you know, the computer does think this is also winning for white. So queen f4, black goes h6, kind of, you know, what are you going to do sort of move. Bishop d3, solid development, not the top move, but not terrible either. The reason it's not the top move is because black can go c4, but even then, I mean, like, this is a very passive structure for black. Well, not if white puts the queen on pre like this, but, you know, after h5, we can imagine white eventually getting that bishop out to a good square, like, once you defend the pawn, and, you know, then your bishop is a million times better than black's in the position. Not to mention other ideas like knight h4 to keep them tied up, yeah? But instead we had rook c8, and, you know, now, I mean, h5 was played, it does fix this structure in white's favour, because if black pushes a pawn, we can just take and open up the king, yes or yes. So queen c7, white goes d takes c5, yeah, you get the Irish triple pawns, and, you know, don't, you know, criticize it too much. Remember, I'm 25% Irish myself. But after knight to d8, we have g4, so just kicking the knight back, bishop e3. I mean, it's one of these sort of positions where it's kind of more lost for black probably than it looks, because how are you going to get this king to h7 when the bishop's covering? And if you're not getting king to h7, like, how are you getting your rook in the game? It's like you're a rook down effectively. So b6, trying to swindle, but cb6, queen c3. King e2, and keep in mind white is still a pawn up after bishop takes b6, but also you can see that the position is just flying open for the pieces. And after knight dc6, rook hb1. At first I thought this was actually like a mistake that the game stopped transmitting, but I think actually it's not too early for black to resign, which is what Masternak did. Like, white can just push this a-pawn, and I mean, your rook is not in the game, your king is not castled, so, and probably quite frankly your queen is getting trapped in some way as well. So, yeah, now that I think about it, I think that, yeah, this was really, like, a good time for black to, you know, set up the pieces and, you know, move on to the next game. Which is what we're going to do as well, by the way. We'll see actually another game by Andreas Hyman, but unfortunately he lost this game. And if you were kind of annoyed that I showed a game where the Caro-Kann got clobbered, well, here we have Marcin Zuba's revenge. So we have the local Polish player playing as black against German Hyman. Let's see who wins in this battle between the neighbouring countries. So last time we saw d takes c4, which is one of the main lines. The other main line is bishop g4, the more, let's say, closed kind of approach, where black is giving up the bishop pair with h3 take, but is saying that the pawns on those light squares very nicely complement his remaining bishop, while at the same time to some degree nullifying the white bishop on f1. White went for the move d4, which quite frankly I don't consider to be as promising as bishop e2 or g3, but that's something I've already talked about in my course in the past. I'm not going to waste your time by repeating what I said there. So d4, black plays d takes e4, saying that after queen takes e4 and knight f6, well, we gain tempo on the queen. The queen does need to keep its defense of the pawn. And after queen to d3, well, it's a position where even here white is probably still a tiny bit better, actually, because of the bishops, but it's playable for black as well. Black doesn't try any funny moves like knight a6 or any of this kind of weird counterplay that I remember my coach back in like late 2015, that Surya Ganguly, he showed me some ideas actually with these kind of positions, like for white and for black. It was quite instructive, but yeah, I mean, in the game, black just plays normally with knight d7, saying, you know, it's blitz, let's just get a position on the board, and I don't care if you're slightly better, I'll outplay you later, is kind of black's philosophy. And so I guess it's also the idea of g6, like it's obviously not going to be as natural as just a usual bishop d6 castle and, you know, try to prepare c5, let's say, or even an e5 break potentially. Which, I mean, does give black some legitimate ideas for counterplay. But g6, yeah, tries to keep more pieces on the board and kind of keep the game going for longer, but also maybe accepting in the process that you're getting a bit more of a disadvantage as black out of the opening. Well, let's see how white kind of self-destructed, because believe it or not, the game was over in 10 more moves from here. So just when you thought it was going to be some boring Caro-Kann, you know, some sort of treatment for insomnia or something, well, then this happens. Bishop f1. I should probably go rook a1, just why not develop the final piece to a good square before maneuvering? Because, I mean, you don't really know where your bishop will be on f1 or f3. It depends where black develops, right? But bishop f1 is played. Knight d5, trying to create some tension. You know, if white were to play knight d5, it's kind of an interesting question. You know, which way should black take back here? And I think she would probably take back with the e-pawn, because I think the more symmetrical structure probably makes it harder for white to actually use those bishop pair, the bishop pair effectively. And, you know, black can probably just trade the rooks like Berlin style and be okay, yeah? But white goes bishop to g3 instead, which I'm not as big of a fan of. Queen b6 was actually quite annoying, hitting this pawn and this guy. After knight takes d5, black did play to move e takes d5, and you can sort of see just the little problem that white has here. So after c3, this is what happened in the game. Rook takes e1 takes, and black, not surprisingly, grabbed the pawn with queen to b2. Now, on the one hand, the computer says, okay, you've got an active rook, you've got compensation with the bishop pair and the active pieces. But after knight f6, it's kind of important that white finds the right move here, and in the game, he didn't really manage to do so. So a good question to ask in these kind of positions, by the way, if you maybe struggle in these situations where you're down a pawn for compensation, is to ask, like, well, what is black's idea? Because if you don't see their idea, you can't stop it, yes or yes, unless you just fluke some good luck. But black wants to go knight e4 and, you know, say, well, I'm going to hit the bishop and hit the pawn. So queen f3 would be a very good prophylaxis, just stopping knight e4 because of mate. Quite a good anti-pre-move in that sense. But instead, white goes bishop to e5, and it's just not the right strategy. Even here after knight e4, actually, you could still go queen f3 and still, like, keep the fight going, because white does have some good activity, at least. It's like, you know, it's never too late to admit your mistake, yeah? That maybe you should have played earlier, but now is the second best time to do it. But instead, white blunders with bishop f4, and, okay, this was only round 2, but maybe, you know, white hadn't yet had his, you know, his morning coffee or something, like, brain was still waking up. And after queen f2, yeah, white resigned because everything is just lost on the spot. A tough break, but, you know, I did show your win earlier, Hyman, so I think you'll forgive me for showing this blunder of yours. In any case, let's see the next game here between Movsesian against Faiz Rakhmanov, and this is, believe it or not, another Caro-Kann. What is it with the Caro-Kann leading the quick wins? Like, you know, people used to think the Caro-Kann's a boring opening, but maybe it's the perfect opening for a quick win with either side. Okay, so Movsesian, the Armenian GM, playing white against Faiz Rakhmanov, d4, d5, e5. Actually, Faiz Rakhmanov, like, it might sound like, okay, there's just some Russian 2500 dude, but actually he has played, like, quite a bit on chess.com. I think he has blitz ranked, like, 2800s or something, so pretty decent player. And so the normal plan is to go knight f3, bishop e2, castle, some short variation kind of stuff, but Instead, knight d2 is a move order where you're trying to be a little bit tricky. This was also by way of recommendation of Wesley So in his lifetime repertoire, e4. And you're basically trying to hold back the c5 break, yeah? Because this is black's main plan to challenge the center and say that white does not simply have a space advantage for free, yes or yes. So knight d7 was played. We had knight f3, and black, rather than, playing some quiet moves like knight e7, h6, and kind of developing more slowly, which indeed might lead back to a short system, black decides to play more directly and just go for the immediate c5, with the idea that after d takes c5 and bishop takes c5, some reason the computer wants to go a6 top bishop b5, but I think 99% of you this is not an important point. Bishop c5 is a more natural move where we, take and... Well, black decided just to take back with the knight directly rather than throw in queen a5, as it were. And I mean, it's a position where white is slightly better, I think, because white does have the bishop pair, and... By the way, the reason white didn't take with the knight is that if we had a bishop here instead of a knight, like bishop b5 check would make black lose the right to castle, so... This is why black does it this way, so, bishop b5, we can at least, block the check and still develop normally, yeah? But still, white goes bishop to e2, just develops solidly, and I think that, white is a little better just on a general kind of level, even if I don't necessarily agree with the exact continuation from a sort of engine perspective. So white goes knight d4, just plays very classically, like, black goes bishop g6, which actually is probably not necessary. Like, if white takes, I think black's knight pair are actually quite competitive against the bishops in a close kind of position, but it is what it is. White went bishop to e3, is very normal development. Knight d7, honestly a little bit passive in my mind. White goes f4, knight f5, and it's the other thing with the Caro-Kann, like some people think the Caro-Kann this opening where you just kind of sit on the position, play solidly, and kind of, beg for a draw. But modern has kind of shown that you can't really get away with that. You have to play the Caro-Kann dynamically, or you're going to suffer against good players. And that's kind of what happens in this game, where c3, bishop e4. And now white plays move a4, very AlphaZero style, wanting to maybe go a5, try to fix the queen side in white's favour. That's maybe the reason why a move like b6 and trying to hold this back might have been an alternative. The computer wants to play a5, but that's a very committal move to play. Like, you're basically saying that the queen side is completely fixed and giving white the free rein to build up play on the king's side. But perhaps this is maybe the best try. Like, you can also maybe try to go knight c5 and, I don't know, have some ideas on these squares. But of course, white is better, yeah? Well, instead, black goes a6, and that does allow white to very instructively fix the pawns with a5. So if black were to go b5, we could simply take en passant, and as you see, the a6 pawn quite quickly comes under fire. Or, in fact, it's just lost at this point. So black goes rook c8, we have queen b3, and after... I'm not sure if queen b3 is necessarily the best, but there's nothing really wrong with it either. Queen b4, knight b8, and, to be fair, in this position after bishop b6, queen e7, rook d1, even if black doesn't blunder in this position, I think white is still clearly better. So let's say, for example, if black plays a move like f6, for instance, trying to attack, I mean... You're not really threatening anything as black, if takes, I mean, so what? White's still got the bishop pair and more space and all that. But yeah, this is definitely a better move than what black did in the game. Black played a move knight c6, and I think just made a very common visualization error, especially in Blitz or at the club level, where he just didn't realize his queen is no longer defended, and that for this reason, white can simply take a free piece with the move queen e4, pinning and winning, because d4, rook d7, white is a piece up. And therefore, Faiz Rachmanov resigned, and, well, it was round 6, and he, I don't think there were any sort of scandals during this World Blitz, but honestly, there weren't really that many. I mean, I guess the biggest thing, if there was something, would be, when Nakamura had to withdraw from the tournament after day 1 due to, contracting the COVID virus. It was kind of ironic in a way, because by kind of bowing out early by necessity, he actually ended up overtaking Carlsen on the FIDE Blitz ranks, because Carlsen just had an absolutely shocking tournament by his standards. 13.5 out of 22. Like, obviously, Carlsen was very unhappy with such a result. Okay, this next game is another one. This one's between Lucas van Foreest, who actually I believe is the reigning Dutch champion. Oh no, it's Max Warmerdam's the reigning Dutch champion, but Lucas van Foreest is a past Dutch champion from, I think, a couple of years ago. So anyway, game went d4, so he plays Scotch Gambit. An opening that's kind of close to my heart, because I remember showing it to many students in the past, and Often they get some quick wins, like with something like c3 and, kind of dumb traps like this that often catch out people at the 1600 level and below. But of course, these guys are not going to fall for this, and Hyman plays what's kind of considered the main line of knight f6 here to meet e5 with d5 and, counterattack. So it's all pretty standard. I mean, knight e4, knight takes d4, so the normal move is bishop d7 historically, but there's nothing really wrong with Hyman's move bishop c5 either. It's kind of point if white sort of takes, you can try to win material, but there's some tricks like, I'll just show you just quickly, like bishop f2. And it's kind of an important point that white actually can't win the rook on a8, in fact, because if bishop a8, there's bishop a6, and white actually has to interpose with the queen to avoid getting mated, which is kind of sad. So that's the point, and that's why white goes bishop e3 instead, but black, says, I insist, take my pieces, and plays castles. So we have knight c6, bc6, captures, not a capture, rook to b8. But then white decides, you know what, I want to capture, queen takes d5. And, at this point, it's not a good idea to continue the captures song, because after knight a3, white is basically a pawn up. So remember, chess is not checkers, we don't have to capture every single time. But black showed his free will by playing the very good move queen e7, lining up some bishop a6 to keep the king in the center, or rook d8 to attack the queen, and of course rook b2 is still on the cards, which after castles is what happened. Rook takes b2 was played, knight c3, and okay, this is something, every single grandmaster on the planet I think has analyzed this with the engine and realizes that, black has full activity. I was going to say for the pawn, but quite frankly, black is going to take it at some point anyway, and even here there's nothing terribly wrong with taking, but the precise engine move to kind of make sure you get equality is to go knight e6, and I think what happened in this game is that black had analyzed this position with the engine, and this is something I was very guilty of when I was a professional chess player, by the way, where I would kind of analyze deeply with the engine and say, okay, I now know that it equalizes, but then I wouldn't really understand the follow-up, and I think that's what happened here, where white goes rook a d1, and, it's not better or worse than any other move here, but, actually, that's not really true. Rook a d1 is actually a mistake, so it's kind of crazy that, the chess-based annotation, gives it, exclamation mark novelty just because white won. Just because white won doesn't mean that this is the best move in the position. That's another common mistake people make when studying. But black just blundered, or maybe blunder's not the right word, but he didn't find a way to punish this mistake, and, maybe you can pause if you want to try and find it for black, because I don't think it's super difficult once you know that something is there. So the move knight d4 is just very strong. The point being that after queen e4, so maybe I'm trying to think why exactly black didn't play this, and I think the honest answer, he just took the pawn without thinking, and so knight d4 just didn't occur to him. But I mean, you can see here that, if the queen moves away, that this bishop is going to not be defended anymore, and, if you play queen f4 trying to, go for this sort of trade, then g5, it looks ugly, and, maybe this is what the players overlooks, that not to consider such an ugly looking move. But yeah, I mean, the queen has to move, and, obviously you're not going to put the queen on pre, but queen e3, and yeah, knight c6, and, black is a piece up, yeah, easy enough. But instead we had rook takes c2. And so instead of it being a miniature where black wins, ends up being a miniature where white wins. Bishop to e4 was played. Again, you're allowing knight g5, but okay, if you miss knight d4, there's no way in a billion years you're seeing knight g5. And so instead of playing this move and being fine, black plays rook b2 and just gets murdered. Knight to d5, and now it's starting to look like an Eminem diss as such, if black being the rap devil and white giving the kill shot, which is the move. Actually, it's not that great a puzzle, because white has a million winning moves, but yeah, queen a3 is a move that was played. Queen c3 is also completely crushing, by the way. Black goes rook b8, because what else are you going to do? And after knight e7, we see the motif of the back rank come into play. So rook takes d8, knight takes d8, and now channeling your Ilya Alekhine, knight to c6, threatening the rook, and also threatening queen f8 checkmate, more importantly. And therefore, Hyman resigned and, licked his wounds after this round 1 game. So that was a pretty crushing example, and, it's a good example of sort of blindness that can happen in Blitz. When you're playing your first game, you're getting warmed up. If you haven't solved your tactics puzzle, whatever, beforehand, maybe you are just, just missing everything somehow, kind of happened here. But, okay, let's see another game. This one was played between Hans Niemann, who you may remember like in a very recent video I showed where he managed to win against an IM in a classical game of Queen Down. And in this game he manages to beat Pavel Pankratov, a 2640-ish rated GM, in just 23 moves. Whoops, not E4, but the move D4 was played. Yeah, the opening was kind of an interesting move order point, like with knight C3. The thing is, if black doesn't play the move D5 and, let white play his, Jabava London or whatever it is he likes to do, if you don't play that D5, like, white's just going to go E4 and just have a much improved version of a 1 E4 opening. Like, you avoided 1 E5 and Sicilian and all that kind of thing. So black goes E5, we have a Philidor, and, okay, Niemann, despite having, being like the press person for Chessable at the, or was it for Chess 24, but okay, but the press person for this group, Play Magnus group, and the Magnus versus Nepo World Championship match 2021, well, I guess he had forgotten or not got the memo about the Rook G1 Chessable variation, but instead he plays Bishop C4, the old main line, Bishop E7, Castle, Castle. This is all pretty standard stuff, but I have noticed that if we're talking at a club level, a lot of players actually struggle a bit against the Philidor. I think the reason why is that black does in theory have the more flexible pawn structure when your knight is on c3 kind of blocking your pawn. So it can be a little bit hard to come with good pawn break as white if you haven't really deeply studied a position before. But of course Niemann is a professional chess player and he knows that, you play h3, just kind of a waiting move. You also prepare bishop b3 without any knight g4 stuff. We have knight b6, bishop b3. Knight fd7 was played. So black's idea is to go ed4 and try to, hit the bishop and hit the a4 pawn. And so while a move like bishop b3 and just, playing it normally and, letting black do his idea because you just don't care, is perfectly fine. But knight e2 is kind of an interesting novelty by Niemann. And, well, okay, novelty is not the right word, but it's an interesting idea. Where you're saying, okay, you're not pressuring the pawn anymore. So I'm just going to take the opportunity to play like c3, knight g3, improve position of knight, and just have a much improved royal pairs where your knights just kind of look a bit stupid, yeah? So therefore it's important for black to play the way he did with ed4 and to, in a certain sense, continue his idea he started with this whole knight b6 and knight fd7, knight c5. I mean, I guess when you're doing these long maneuvers like it may allows you to show your erudition of going through the whole Soviet school system. But okay, these jokes aside, instead of white playing c3 and, going for this kind of trade, he goes bishop f4 instead, and, well, wants to go for a more original sort of position, I guess, with knight takes b3, and, well, it's an interesting question. Would you take back with the pawn or with the knight in this position as white? Now, as much as I like to show cases where the double pawns are good, this is not one of those cases. Like, cb3, d5 would actually be pretty annoying in this position, like creating some lease of life for black's pieces. So it's just, you should just take with a knight as Niemann did. Yeah, it does mean that, your pawn a4 is a little bit vulnerable, and that's probably the reason why black is objectively not doing so badly here. But still, white managed to win it quite quickly, as black, well, kind of screwed it up a bit later. Plus, I would have put the queen on d2 just because I want to attack that pawn as well as go for some rook d1 business, but okay, we had bishop f8. This is how the game went. Knight bd2, trying, I guess, to, maneuver the pieces, maybe b3 to defend the pawn and free the rook. It's not really the top line according to the engine, and that's because if black opens up the position for his bishop pair with d5, he's just basically doing fine. Because the one advantage white has in this position is basically like slightly better development and more space. But if black can just liquidate a whole lot of pieces, neither of these things really matter that much. Whereas the bishop pair is an ace in the hole, as it were. But instead of that, black goes queen f6, which, okay, it's also reasonable, although it is true that here you don't have queen takes b2, because white goes rook b1. Actually, maybe it matters which rook you move, like this one's better, so that when they play queen f6, like it's kind of important that you are able to take this without hanging a rook on a1. It's why we play rook ab1 and not rook eb1 to, understand the wrong rook problem, as it were. So black goes d5, he tries to free his position in this way, and it's a case, I think, of a good idea just timed not very well, because now white found a really great move of bishop to c7. Well done if you saw that move from afar. It's not an easy one, but it's kind of loose pieces drop off kind of territory, yeah? And a move like rook a6, while necessary, is a kind of ugly looking move, like your rook is not really in play on a6, right? But after knight c4, the problem is white is just faster. He played e takes d5, winning in the center. knight takes b2 is black's move, but now after queen to b3 defending the queen, we see that the knight... knights are not very good when they're fiend-kettoed, right? Because they only have 4 squares to move to from a fiend-kettoed position. And so it makes it much easier to trap those knights. Yes or yes. Now, black played bishop f5, but white just went bishop e5, and it becomes apparent very quickly that black is just losing material. And after rook e5, bishop d6, it's like everything wins at this point for white, but the simplest is the move that white played in the game, rook takes f5. And given it after queen e5 and queen b2 that black is a piece down for absolutely nothing, this is why Ponkaradov resigned after rook takes f5. So another pretty crushing game, and I am sort of curious now, like we're actually getting pretty close to the end actually. Let me see. Yeah, we have 2 more games to get through, so keep your thinking caps on and let's finish this. Well, I was going to say marathon, but I'm kind of just more like a sprint, yeah, with how quick I'm going through the games. So this next game here is between Bassem Amin, nearly 2700 rated Grandmaster from Egypt. Actually was rated 2700, was rated above 2700 in the past, but he was playing against Peng Li Min, and I know you're probably thinking he's from an Asian country, but apparently he actually represents Ukraine. Anyway, the game went d4, and the system that black played, like knight f6 and this sort of Nimzovich with one knight c6. I mean, it's a system that's not like absolutely dead lost for black, but you're kind of having a poor man's Pirt's defense. Because you're committing the knight c6 early, and that gives white some extra options. Like, for example, d5 is a very appealing idea, just kicking the knight and, going like queen d2 and long castle and just attack is pretty dangerous, to be quite frank. Like, Indian gives +1 to give you an idea. But the way that Bassem played just h3 and kind of playing, a 150 style attack, but where the knight doesn't really belong on c6 is also perfectly fine. And also gives white a very nice advantage, kind of, keeping a d5 in reserve, yeah? So after castles, white plays the move queen to d2. I mean, d5 again is possible, but this is fine also. And now black plays the move of a6, which is kind of a move that, you sometimes see, like, in these positions where they say, okay, I'm going to go b5 and try to create some counterplay for when you castle long. Objectively, it's not that good in a blitz game, though. It's a pretty decent decision, I think. Well, white plays a4, just wanting to keep control and just play very, very positional, rather than trying to attack the king with bishop h6, let's say. But then black goes e5, and this is kind of the argument that, again, with these moves thrown in, black is trying to get a better version of some King's Indian, where, say, if white does play d5, which is the computer's recommendation, like, the argument that Pirt's players normally make here is that after knight e7, that, okay, you got a King's Indian, but where your pawn is stuck on c2, like, you don't have c4 and c5. But it's actually not that simple in reality, because white has to move a5 in this concrete position to fix this structure in white's favour, so black can't really challenge easily. But even if that wasn't a factor, like, white also has moves like g4, where kind of like the Makoganov ideas I showed you in the notes to the Goreyev Caruana game before, like, if black's not getting an f5 in a good version, and, if black does play f5, he just weakens his own king in principle. I mean, what is black doing here? I mean, yeah, you can go c6, but then you're also weakening bishop b6 and such, so, white is just basically better, yes or yes. So, instead in the game, white goes d takes e5, and, it also is, let's say, the safe approach, but I guess it's also treated like white's not really getting a real advantage, but, Bassem's not one of these players who tries to beat you in the opening. He just tries to, like, get a solid middle game that he understands very well. He's, had thousands of games experience in, like, his King's Indian attacks with white and such, and that's his approach that, has worked for him. Now, white decides to castle long, which is kind of an original approach. I feel like playing bishop c4 or taking first might be a better idea objectively. But castles long, okay, you're spicing up the game and getting a certain type of position, I guess. So after queen e7, again, white should probably go bishop c4, but if you do this, like, it's not really clear why you castle long and, have this, this gaping wound that black can go after. So white goes knight d5, and, at this point, actually, black is kind of outplaying white in this position, to be quite frank. Like, after this very nice move, rook d8, pinning the pawn to the queen, which was playing a game, like, it's actually black who is much better. So how did white manage to turn things around and actually kind of win from this position? Well, the answer is he played bishop to c4. And I mean, black, it's kind of a critical position. Like, if you don't find exactly the right move in this kind of very sharp situation, like, the pendulum can very easily shift in white's favour. And so it's kind of important for black to play e4 and sort of bring the dragon bishop, or in this case, the Pirt's bishop, to life. If white goes knight to g5. I mean, it's kind of like, so what? You know, b5, and white can't even take that pawn, by the way, because then there's going to be like this and also a mate threat. So black just rips open the path to the white king, you know, like bishop b3, ba4, rook b8 kind of stuff, and basically white's completely screwed at this point, to put it bluntly. But instead we had the move b5, and that doesn't work quite as well, actually, because, well, one reason is that according to computer you have this move bishop to g5, and I can't go f6 because dc6 then comes with a check, as you can see here, this is pretty nasty. But if black has to go bishop f6 to not lose the exchange, it's kind of like, well, the attack is a lot less effective when that, you know, that bishop from afar is traded, right? So that's kind of what the difference is here. But okay, this is not so easy to see in a blitz game, and I have a feeling both players just completely overlooked bishop g5. Instead, bishop b3, the kind of automatic move, was played. Black now, again, b takes a4 is perfectly fine, actually. You know, you're opening up the file for the rook on the b file. You know, knight b4 is also a good move. You're hitting this pawn, so, you know, despite missing e4 so far, black's actually played pretty well in this middle game. So white goes bishop b3, trying to keep this defended. And now I think black just plays too slowly. Now, one thing to keep in mind about the principle of the hook is that it doesn't just apply like to attacking the pawns, but it also applies to attacking the pieces. And so that might give you a hint as to black's move that he should have played, which is actually the only move, not only to be winning, but even just to keep any sort of advantage. And that's the move a5. Like, when you've got these opposite castling positions, like, the time is the most important factor, yeah? And so it's very important that, you know, if white goes bishop g5, trying to, you know, do some f6, d6 cheapos, black can even play this move queen d6, and it's quite an instructive point that white can actually black can actually sacrifice a full rook in this position, because it turns out that after bishop c4, a3, that black's attack is just faster, with like takes and e4 and, you know, this sort of attack coming. And I mean, the move like b3 doesn't even really stop it, yeah, because e4 and, you know, a2, and again, like, black is just faster. And okay, to see this in a blitz game, I think is quite difficult, but it's a very beautiful variation for sure. And, you know, I love showing you these ideas when they come up, because, well, we can definitely learn something from them, even if it's not so easy to see it. At least understanding it broadens our horizons, right? But black played the more, let's say, quiet rook b8, and I mean, yeah, when you're playing a play of this level, like, all it takes is, like, you know, giving them one opportunity to get back in the game, and in general, they're going to take it, right? So, although actually that's not quite true here, because actually white could have played bishop g5 and, again, had an advantage, but after rook h1, you are giving black that second chance to, you know, course correct, you know, a move like bishop f5, for example, trying to hit this guy, or, you know, if you do really want to avoid the move bishop g5, like queen d6 is a decent prophylaxis. By the way, it also stops any of these like f6, d6 ideas, which might be annoying at some moment, as we've seen before. But yeah, king h8 was played instead, and this is just not as good a prophylaxis. In fact, it turns out it's just a blunder because of white's next move. I think what black was pinning his hopes on was that after bishop g5, that f6 is kind of kicking the bishop. And what black completely overlooked is that white is not forced to retreat the bishop and just accept that he is considerably worse, but instead we crash through with knight takes e5. Good job, by the way, if you found this move. The point, of course, being that black is not in time to take the bishop, because we have a tactic knight takes g6, and we simply take that queen off the board next turn. And also they can't take the knight, obviously, because bishop e7, but if black plays queen f8, which is the move he did in the game, then another very important move, d6, and, you know, we just crash through at knight f7. And there's nothing black can do about this, because if you play d takes e5, or f takes e5 trying to, you know, trade the 2 minor pieces for the rook, I mean, well, I mean, you even can play, like, bishop takes d8. The kind of the funny line is dc7, where, like, you have the, you know, vanishing cabinet, the queen leaves one world, and then, you know, comes back and reincarnates right back to life like a phoenix. Well, black goes rook d6 instead. But after knight f7, queen f7, bishop f7, like you can see that rook d2 is not enough because of rook to e8, and, you know, don't take the bishop right away, it's not checkers, but you got bishop f6 checkmate, as it were, thanks to the pin. In the game, we had f takes g5, rook e8, check, bishop f8, queen c3 check, and, you know, it's mate in the next move, and so black resigned here. A very fun little game, and I think I have one more game to share with you for this video. And this one actually is a bit higher level than some of the other ones we've seen, as this was a game played by Daniel Dubov on round 15 against another very strong blitz player, Haik Martirosyan, but somehow, Dubov was able to kind of get his sort of position and, play it very creatively, as I'm sure you know about Dubov's style. So G3, so playing his favourite Catalan, which you may recall he prepared for Carlsen for his World Championship match against Nepo, and, maybe you know of this drama, right, where, Kayakin and some other, Russians were saying, like, oh, Dubov is, like, a traitor to his country because he supported, Magnus for the match and not working with Nepo's team. And then Nepo was like, well, actually, I kind of want to thank Dubov because it was the lines that Dubov prepared for Magnus where I had the best chances to beat Magnus in the match. So kind of funny, the different perspective, but... Okay, after a4, so trying to hold back b5 as such before taking the pawn. The main line, of course, is to go bishop d7, and certainly to go into the theory deeply would be outside the scope of this video, but you can see white has a central majority and can try to, support it with the pieces, as it were, support its advance, while black may try to put the knight on b4, or at least say that white's structure lacks a tad of flexibility on the queen side. But black goes b6, kind of trying to, surprise the opponent and play some solid bishop b7, knight d7, c5, like trying to equalize like this. Well, Dubov just says, I'll just play bishop to g5, not the usual Catalan knight e5 and getting the knight and bishop active, but just saying, well, I'm going to try this idea of knight d2 and take back with the knight instead. Like, it's very Dubov-esque saying that, okay, I'm going to let you hang on to the pawn after all, but I'm going to say that I'm sacrificing it for compensation. Now, probably objectively, the better way to play it is maybe a move like b3, and, kind of like sack and say you've got this. Though I will admit this is not the best version of this b3 pawn sack for white, moves like bishop e4. I mean, black is probably the one fighting for an advantage, but probably white is not losing either, let's put it like this. But instead we had the move bishop f6, and yeah, like in terms of the opening, black definitely played it better, but somehow he screwed it up later. So after knight e4, trying to get the knight in like this. Now, the move that black should probably play is just something simple like bishop to e7, like just keep your bishop pair alive. I mean, you could also play a move like knight c6 if you want to be a bit more direct, but you don't really want to play knight bishop takes d4 because, well, you're kind of just self-pinning, right? I could even play knight takes d4 if he wants to, and, knight g5, and you threaten mate, and you threaten the bishop at the same time with the discovery, so, like, this is the, if you like, the point of white's play. Martirosyan went for the move knight to d7, but that allowed a few tricks as well. And now with the move knight fg5, suddenly, you've got some ideas like taking here and hitting this, and, probably the most solid option for black is just to take and, just play the kind of opposite coloured bishop sort of position, potentially. Say if you play, I don't know, a move like rook b8 allows you to keep the extra pawn, and I'm not sure if white really is getting full compensation here, in all fairness. But black goes bishop g5 instead, and maybe allows white a little bit more to justify his play. Like, now at least, white's got a good bishop, and you've got some concrete ideas like bishop c6, potentially. Which is probably the reason, like, it turns out you can't really keep your extra pawn as black anyway. So if you can't keep it, try to give it back in the best possible way, and I think the way to do that would have been to play rook a to b8. So that if white takes the pawn, which probably is what he should do, well, c6, you kind of see, the bishop is sort of trapped. Now, okay, you can play a, b5, and b3, so it's not like black is winning this piece here, but still, it's kind of annoying enough that it ties white up and will allow black to maintain the balance. Unfortunately for Martirosyan, he played rook a7, and Dubov pounced on this oversight with a very nice move, bishop to c6. Okay, computer points out you can also go bishop e4 and kind of do a double attack this way, but, bishop c6 is what was played. And after knight b8, yeah, again, computer is saying it's a little better to actually keep that good bishop over the knight, but Dubov just took directly, and, well, there is a little bit of a difference here that, that pawn on c6 is a little bit exposed, as well as the pawn on c4. And so again, after queen b5 position is actually quite close to being balanced once again. It's only a small advantage for white, but somehow, because black had to make some tough decisions before, he's come under a little pressure, right? Maybe the time trouble was also a factor in this point. And the reason I took that drink break is not just because it's the middle of summer here in Australia, but also because to give you a chance to not just play the automatic queen c6 as in the game, but to actually see that rook b8 is just a little bit more precise. The point being that it's kind of more valuable to get this guy than this guy. Like, if white goes queen c4, for example, you take, and then, you're actually hitting this pawn on e2. Not only that, but you also got moves like rook b6 in some moments. Like, let's say rook a4, rook b6. Suddenly you're defending and you're attacking at the same time. And if you play a move like d5, then, d5 then becomes weak. So, okay, the endgame is equal. It should be a draw, but you can see that black is not really in any danger of losing whatsoever. Despite the a7 rook looking a little passive, it is behind the passed pawn, as it should be in such endings. But instead, queen c6 was played, and the difference here is that white is actually not forced to play queen c4, which maybe is still slightly better for white anyway, but the move rook a4 is a little bit more precise, where you line up Alekhine gun, so you've got the pressure against this c7 pawn. And okay, to be fair, rook b8 is probably not as good now as it was on the previous move, even though you take the open file. And the game continuation kind of demonstrates why that's the case. So after queen b6, white does take the pawn, because, I mean, why are you setting up the Alekhine gun if you're not to take the pawn like this? But after takes, this is where black made his blunder, and frankly, it's a very elementary blunder by the standards of these players. But okay, it was round 15, probably just some fatigue was coming into play. Well, what black did was he played the move queen takes b2, and I think you see why this is bad, but instead what you should do is just go into the pawn down ending and realize that, in a position like this after, let's say, g5, for example, trying to grab some space on the king side, as well as, renew the threat of rook takes b2. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of pawns on the board. Definitely white still has some winning chances, but at the same time, black doesn't have any real weaknesses, right? I mean, you can play rook b3 to fix the pawn. You can, kind of fix their pawn and get things moving along like this. And I think that as long as you don't kind of do anything obviously stupid as black, you're probably going to draw this. Because given if white does create a passed pawn, like king is not really in position to support, yes or yes. So that would be the way for black to kind of hold, at least if he plays correctly. Of course, white is going to grind for a million years, but with correct play, black will draw this. But, of course, we didn't get correct play in the game because queen b2 and, well, queen c8 is very simple back rank mate, and this is why Martyrosian resigned rather than allowing a mate on the next move. So, yeah, these were the games I wanted to share you, these sort of World Blitz miniatures from the 2021 World Blitz Championship in Warsaw. I think you'll agree that the nice thing about these fast games, you get to see the tactics, you get to very clearly see what one side is aiming for, right? And so I hope that these videos, like, of course, you guys who have watched a lot of my videos already will know that my mission is to serve the 2,000 plus players, and that's why I did rush a little bit for a few points. It'll kind of be obvious for this level of player, even if it's maybe less obvious for the guys below 2,000 watching this, but still I think, even if you didn't maybe understand every single one of the moves that was played in this game, I think you've enjoyed the different tactical patterns that came up and how to punish different mistakes. So, like, you don't have to understand something 100% in order to improve a lot from it. Even a 50% understanding will give you a big progress if you're able to, of course, implement it in your games, and that's where the coaching comes in to help you with that. So on that note, well, glad that you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your comment of what your favorite move or what your favorite game was, just because I'm curious to hear. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.